My name is Amanda Tate. I'm from Florida. I've always been raised in church, had very spiritual Christian grandparents and Christian influence. My parents were divorced when I was really young. Matter of fact, one of the first memories that I have of my mom and my dad, I remember I was a toddler, and I remember following my mom running out of our apartment where we lived, and my mom and dad were in a fight. And I remember stopping in the middle of the concrete on the sidewalk and saying, well, who do I run to? And I followed my mother. And I remember we went to my aunt's house. And from that point forward, I remember that they had a divorce. And I had visitation with my dad. And at first, I love my dad. And I love my mother. But I was a daddy's girl growing up. And so I really, really enjoyed spending time with him. And my dad didn't go to church at that point in time. And shortly after, he actually got remarried. And I really didn't have a good relationship with my stepmother. I really felt like she didn't like me growing up. And during this time, my mother would take me to church. I knew she loved the Lord, but at that point in time, she, was walking through a lot. And so, growing up, I felt like I was kind of forced to go to church. The church that I grew up in, I really didn't feel anything, and so I was just kind of there. And my mom did her best to keep me in church, and I did go, but I wouldn't really say that I enjoyed it. During this point in time, my dad was a truck driver, and so whenever I would go see visitation with him, I would not see him actually. I would just spend time with my stepbrothers and my stepmother. And it was during this time that the older stepbrother started molesting me for a long time. And I really, growing up in my family, there was no talking about our feelings or about our emotions, or so I just kind of learned to keep them all inside. And I felt like I had no advocate. I felt that no one really cared to know or really ask me how any of this made me feel, or was really there for me emotionally. And so I guess I walked around with a burden for a very long period of time, with a secret, and never really knew how to express myself. So I would just bottle that up, the hurt, the pain, the secrets, the everything that the molestation had brought, the shame, at a very young age. And so that's how Satan works. He comes at you at a very young age, and that is basically how my life began. How I met the father of the child of my first abortion. We actually went to school together, and how this all transpired, I had a bout most of my life with alcoholism. How this all transpired, that led up to how I met the dad of my child of the first abortion. After all of my painful childhood, and I finally was 18, I graduated. Actually graduated 4th or 5th in my class. I had high honors. I was on the beta club, competed in pageants. Just looking at me, you could not tell of all the things that I was carrying. But I finally turned 18 and I was going to move to Panama City. Growing up, I was very sheltered. I was never allowed to go to spring break. I was never allowed to do those things. And I know it was my mom trying to protect me. You know, she was wanting what was best for me. But I was finally free and rebellious. And so some of my friends and I, we were going to move to Panama and go to college there. It was during this time that we moved in, and I went to college for a while. I actually had a full ride. I had a full paid scholarship for my academics. And I was actually going for psychology because I wanted to find out what was wrong with me. So I felt that was the best career choice. And so it started out good. We went to all the clubs like that I was never allowed to go to and all of this. And it was during one of those going to Club La Vila one night. We passed the strip club. And I looked at my friend and I'm like, wow, you know, I've never been in one of those. I'm not quite sure. You know, I think it was just the whole mystery of it. And at that point in time, I think the molestation led me to be more promiscuous, and I was looking for my identity. I was looking for someone to validate me. And so for me, that was men, because my dad was never there for me when I was the age of I could not go see my dad anymore. I told the judge I didn't want to see my dad anymore. So at this point in time, my dad really hadn't been in my life. I think it was around 12. And so he also kind of rejected me because we actually went to court for the whole molestation, and my dad hugged me and told me he loved me before we went in the courtroom, but then basically sat on the opposite side and took the side of my stepbrother and basically called me a liar. And so that really opened up a deep wound of rejection. So I was looking for someone to love me. You know, I never really felt I was good enough. And that's the only way I knew how to express that. So after the Club La Vila one night, my friend and I stopped at this strip club. And the bouncer at the door told us that we had to have a male companion, you know, to walk us in. We couldn't just come in without a male escort. And so we waited by the door, and the next guy to come in, we politely asked him, said, hey, we can't come in without you. Would you mind walking us in? And so he agreed. When we got in, we kind of sat in the back. And I remember watching a few of the girls on stage, and the next girl to walk out, her stage name was Madison. And she was tall and more like the Barbie doll type. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, that's not really who I thought I would see. You know, I was like, well, she actually looks, you know, classy. And I remember watching her, you know, very graceful. And I remember looking down at her ankle, and she had a huge stack of $20 bills. And so that appealed to me. Being in college and, you know, at the time working 2 jobs. So I told my friend that I was living with, I said, hey, you know, never in a million years would I think that I would even have the guts to do this. And but I looked at her and I said, what do you think? I said, you think we could do this? And she was like, well, I guess there's only one way to find out. And so that began my 6 years of stripping. She started a week after I did. It was during this time where the DJ really liked me, so we actually ended up dating. I did not know he was an alcoholic. And our abusive relationship began. He would get drunk. He would get so drunk and he would not remember anything. He put me in the hospital. He's hit me. I remember I actually still have a scar under my eye from where he punched me one night. And I never, at that point in time, I wasn't even old enough to drink. I didn't drink for a while. It came to a point in time where I don't know why I didn't leave him. I think I was still trying to, my mom had been through a lot of marriages, and it was something in me that I was like, well, I'm going to stay. I don't want to follow in those footsteps, even if it meant being in a destructive relationship. Crazy, I know. But he hit me and put me in the hospital, and we actually went to court, and he had a domestic violence. And we actually weren't supposed to, we were court ordered not to see each other. I violated that, and I went back to him. So it was during this point that I was like, I took on this mentality, like, well, if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them. And wow, that really was the downward spiral. Things just began to take the worst turn ever. I remember hiding my bruises at work on my eyes, and trying to cover them with makeup, not going into work for a week, and making excuses for him. We got in a fight again, and this time I went to jail. He withheld the phone from me. I left some scratches on his arm, and so I went to jail for that. I left for a little while. My mom begged me not to go back, but I went back. I went through a time of just, the drinking, the vodka, it got so bad that you could have literally at one point walked into our living room and waded through the sea of 1.75 liter vodka bottles. And I remember saying, how did my life come to this? He would tell me no one would believe me. He would make me believe that I was nothing. It got to a point where the alcoholism affected my brain. And I remember going and hearing people. I would hear that one of the ladies that I danced with, that she was in a gang and the gang was out to get me. I remember telling him there were people across the road and I could hear them coming for us, and I was scared. I was hiding in the shower and these people weren't there. For about 2 weeks. And it finally got to the point where it got so bad that I think he actually called the cops, and they took me to a mental evaluation center there in Panama, and they diagnosed me with schizophrenia, or a schizophrenic break. I know that it was a demon. I know now. I know because even though they diagnosed me with that, I could still tell the whole story. They asked me many times, and they asked me if I was using any drugs. I told them no. They did a drug test. Came back, I was not doing any drugs. And I told them the story. And while I was in this mental hospital, I remember seeing several demons. I saw several of them, and at one point I could feel them like taking over my body. I remember talking to the counselor, and everything that was coming out of my mouth, I remember it being like, this is not me. I remember thinking that in my head, this is not me. This is not me saying this. It was like I was almost beside myself, and I was watching what I was saying. I was hearing what I was saying, but I'm like, where is this coming from? And the craziest thing, though, you know, the Bible says, raise the child in the way they ought to go, and when they are older, they will not depart from it. In that place, God was with me, because the whole time I was in this place, I was not participating with the other people, but I was off in the corner and I was worshiping God. I was singing worship songs to myself, and I was crying out to God. I was telling him, I was like, Lord, help me. I don't exactly remember how many days I was there, but it was one morning. I woke up and I was completely a different person. And I remember they were releasing me, and I was walking out on the back patio, and one of the other people that were there with me, she came up and she said, you know, she's like, I've watched you. You are completely different. And God saved me there. The point that I got pregnant, I actually, I had moved out. I finally got out of the situation that I was in. I'd moved back. It was after the stay at the mental institution, and I moved back with my mother. She took me in, and I went to cosmetology school. I want to say that, you know, things got better, but they didn't. I was still looking for someone to love me, and so I would go out with, you know, different guys, and I would still drink. There was still that hole in my heart, you know, and trying to find anyone to fill that. But she took me in, and I finally went on a date with one guy, and we got pregnant, and so this is my husband, and we actually got married. He was in the military. So I got pregnant with my first son and had him, and he got orders to move to Washington State. And so we flew to Washington State, and he was there for about 2 years. It was there I had my second son. The times I wasn't pregnant, I was still drinking. I was drinking wine heavily. And our marriage was not good. We didn't know how to love each other. I never felt really that, because of the way that it transpired and the way that we got married, you know, because I was pregnant. And so I still carried those deep feelings of not really like, oh, well, he really didn't kind of choose me. I never expressed that to him, but it showed. And there would be many nights, you know, he would go when we would have a fight. He didn't know how to talk about that. He would leave. I didn't know how to talk about that, so I would yell. And, you know, it led to a lot of miscommunication and a lot of that. I actually met my husband the way that I had my first 3 kids before I had my 2 abortions. And so he was in the military, and what drew me to him, his personality. He made me laugh, which is something I hadn't done in a very long time. And I really, just this need. I'm not sure that I truly, you know, really didn't know love. I'm not going to say that, and to be honest, I don't think either of us loved each other really when we got married. I think he grew up with a lot of sisters, and so I guess it was him not giving up on me. I did get pregnant a fourth time, but it wasn't with him. It got to a point, I think it was about 8 years into our marriage, that it got really bad, and I would drink all the time. I was still drinking all the time. He would be gone all the time with his job. Neither of us really knew how to communicate, and the marriage was falling apart. He actually started seeing another woman behind my back, and I knew something was off. I couldn't really put my finger on it, and it wasn't until I had actually looked at his phone and I saw a message that he was taking her to his mom's, and she lives in another state, for Christmas. And so after that, I'm like, wow. And it was then that I knew that he came to me and he said that he was leaving me. At the time, it was relief. I'm not gonna lie. I really didn't want to be with him. And then at the same time, it was such like a reinforcement of that rejection. And I remember thinking, well, who's gonna love me now? So after that, I was sitting at home alone, drinking in the dark. My kids had went to bed and he was gone. My husband, still my husband at the time, we hadn't officially gotten divorced, but he was with her. And so I was sitting there alone, and I remember just being so unbelievably lonely. And it's crazy because I knew that God was telling me not to do it, but I did it anyway. And I called him knowing that he really liked me in high school. And so at this point in time, I was really lonely and drinking by myself. And I remember this guy from high school that I had went to school with, and I remember, he really liked me. So I called him, or actually I messaged him, and was just seeing how he was doing, and invited him over. And it was there that I started going, we started a relationship and dating him, and still all while I was drinking, and he really didn't mind. I did slack off for a while with that, but I want to say it was about 5 months that we did become pregnant. And he was really excited. He actually had 3 girls of his own, and so it was a full house. But he was really excited. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I really, at that point, I really didn't want any more children. My little girl, the last child that I had with my husband, actually had a few health things. And then my relationship with him, with the guy from high school, started to fall apart. My husband actually wanted me back, and he came back and he told me that he still loved me. And in my heart, I'm gonna be honest, at first I'm like, I didn't want to pursue that. The guy You know, he had actually moved in with me, and he moved out. My husband came back, and I was very fearful of saying anything to him about it. I was afraid of, like, oh, he's going to reject me, and, you know. And surprisingly, somehow it came about, and he had actually guessed it. And I looked at him, and I'm like, well, what are we going to, you know, how do you feel about me carrying another man's child? And, you know, he said that he didn't know if he could do it. And I was already thinking about, you know, the health problem. I didn't want to go through that again with having another baby, so I was scared. I was scared at what would happen if I did carry this child, and that's how the decision was made. It was out of fear, and out of the fear of not knowing if he could love this child like his own. And we decided to have an abortion. I remember pulling up to the abortion clinic, and I remember sitting in the waiting room with all these women. I knew that it was wrong. I've always been pro-life. I've never felt. I felt like I was between a rock and a hard place, and I remember sitting in the waiting room and looking at all those women and trying to stuff down my feelings, and I went through the procedure, and I think I was actually a lot farther along than I thought I was, and what they led me to believe that I was, because I know I could read him. I could read the doctor, and, you know, he pulled out the ultrasound machine, and he would look, and just, I could tell that I was a lot further along than I thought. And so he actually had called in, it was like 3 or 4 nurses for this procedure, and he didn't tell me, you know, they had told me that it would be a vacuum, where it just involved them sucking out the baby. I remember the nurse holding my hand, and 2 or 3 of the other nurses being down while he was doing the procedure, and I remember wondering why it was taking so long. I remember crying. I was holding the nurse's hand so hard, and everything in me was like, I couldn't believe that I was actually following through with this, but at this point in time, it was too late. And I remember after it was over, going in the room that they take you in and give you, you know, the medication for the pain, and sitting you in a chair, and all over these walls are stories of other women that have had abortions, and I remember looking at them and reading them and sitting there trying to hold back my tears because I did not agree with anything that any of these women were saying. And I remember going, these are such lies. These are such lies. All of it. All of this is a lie. All of this. And I walked out, and we went to dinner afterwards, and I'd always bottled up everything, you know, and I felt that's what I did with this, you know. I never communicated to my husband. I never said that what I was feeling, and there was a lot that was left unsaid. If someone were to come with me and they were faced with the same situation, I would tell them that this baby has a destiny, and they deserve life. And I would tell them what I didn't know then. There are so many people, so many families, so many moms, or families that cannot have children. I would tell them that there's so many options. There's things that these abortion clinics don't say. They don't tell you, and actually when you call them, they make it a specific point to say, well, this particular one did, don't get us mixed up with the pro-life people down the road. We're kind of by each other. Make sure you don't go there. But there's so many other options. There's adoption, He formed us in our mother's womb. Beforehand, each one of us. And that baby has a destiny. It was preordained. He or she was preordained. Not shortly after that I had the first abortion that I became pregnant again by my husband. So again, this one, I was in an alcoholic state, and another big reason for the one with my first one too is I was really drinking heavily, like really heavily, and I did not know about, I did not know about if I had done something to my baby for the alcoholism, which was not my choice to make. Now in retrospect, I know that, but that was another fear. I was not in a state. I believe that I was not in a state to raise another child. It was almost a burden. It was almost a burden, like I can't take another straw. My husband didn't oppose it. So I do I feel like the Holy Spirit has told me what my children were. I believe the first one was a girl, and I've named her Anna. And the second one, I believe, was a boy, and his name is Isaiah. I have not seen them. I did have someone else confirm to me that my first one was a girl. I believe Jesus is still healing that part of me, because I don't talk about it with my husband. We both kind of know, but we don't talk about it. I know that God is bringing healing in that area, but for me, my healing came when I was able to sit down on my bed one day when I was alone in my house, and I sat down, and I don't remember if it's something I heard or a song or exactly what it was, but I remember breaking down and saying, Lord Jesus, please forgive me. I asked my children to forgive me, and he spoke to me, and he said, now it's time for you to forgive you. And I think that's what really, I know a lot of people don't think of it like that, but that's where deep healing comes, when you're able to forgive yourself, when you're able to let go of the shame, the rejection that I carried for so long, then not feeling like I was good enough for anyone. Jesus says you're good enough. You're good enough because he came to die for you. He loves you. He loves you that much. Being able to forgive my husband was actually not something that I had thought about until I came here. At this summit, one of the speakers had said, I want you to think about who it is that you haven't forgiven, and let Holy Spirit just bring to your mind, and he brought that to my mind. He's like, now you have to forgive your husband. And I think that's where the rest of the healing took place. We're all broken. Every single one of us. But he has to break you, because not saying that it was, Jesus didn't do any of this, it was me. But now I can speak about it. Now I can tell others. Now I have a testimony. and the compassion that comes through walking through the valley that you could never get on the mountain. If there's someone out there and you're saying that, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to do it, that may be true. But God sees the end from the beginning. And He knows every story and every chapter of your life. And I'm just here to tell you that there is light on the other side. And He will be with you through every step. He's going to guide you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And I know this because I'm sitting here telling you that my story didn't end, that He brought me out. He brought me out on the other side. He restored my marriage. And no longer do I not want to get up every day. No longer would I just rather lay in the bed. He gave me purpose. He gave me identity. And I know now whose I am and who I am because of Him. And I know my next step is going to be to help even mothers like you, mothers that are on the brink of a decision. If someone asks you today, would you choose life? If someone asks you today, would you not go to the abortion clinic if you were able to maybe hand your baby over for just a short period of time while you got your life together? Would you say yes? God turns it all around for the good. Everything, every mess. God bless you.